Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Milka Rubin, and I'm the curator of the Humanities collection at the National Library of Israel. In my capacity as curator, I've been in charge of a series of seminars at the library devoted to the digital humanities. In the past years, we have had one seminar which discussed historical geographic information systems for reconstructing the past, and another about computer technologies for the historical research of intellectual networks. The present conference, a collaboration with Anat Ben-David and her team, without whom this wouldn't have happened, this conference, this is clearly the apex of this program, as it contends with the most vital issue, the future of history. Being a historian in my schooling, I don't know much about the technical side of web archiving, but I can definitely see that such an undertaking is both imperative and crucial if we want to leave behind us any form of sources and documents that will provide keys to understanding the past for future generations, or even to have such keys ourselves in 10 or 20 years. Or maybe tomorrow, after the last talk. We're delighted to have you all here for this conference, both those who have made the effort to come physically, still despite the overwhelming progress of remote communication, the best way to communicate, and those who couldn't make it and will be with us throughout this conference via Zoom. And this will be the case with the last lecture in this session. I'm convinced that the library's web archiving project will benefit greatly from this conference. So without further ado, let us begin this first session on institutional perspectives. And our first speaker will be Claude Mussou from the Institut National de l'Audiovisual. When the web legal deposit was implemented in France, Claude Mussou was appointed as coordinator of the web archiving activities at INA. Since 2015, she's head of the INATech, INA's department that makes all the collections available for research. Please.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me for this conference. It was a great opportunity. So some of you might know and some of you might not know what INA is. So I will briefly tell you a little bit about INA. It is the National French Broadcast and Audiovisual Archive. It was created by law in 1974, notably to organize a national broadcast for archive. This was at a time of public state broadcast monopoly, and the setup of an archive was to make the material available for reuse in a professional context. It was not envisioned to make it available to academics or students or either to the general public. But then, of course, with the digitization of everything became more easily available, and INA makes a lot of its material now available both to the general public and to students and scholars in different ways. Why is that so, and how is that so? Well, this is because INA works within a framework that is called the legal deposit. So some of you also might know that the legal deposit is a French invention, that the King François Ier invented this in the 16th century. So that it was there was like a censorship measure. It was a religion war context, and it was to make sure that everything that was published within the Kingdom of France would be collected, and so to see if things might not be distributed. So it was to make things like under control for as far as print material was concerned, but also to build up heritage collections and make them available for research purposes. And gradually the legal deposit extended to various carriers like photographs, maps, scores, and the National Library in France has been in charge of this. But then in 1992, the law was extended to radio and TV. Why is that so? It's because the public monopoly disappeared and new private radio and TVs came up, and nobody was there to collect the material to build heritage collections. So the legal deposit was extended to radio and TV, and INA, because it had experience in archiving audiovisual material, was made responsible for this. So the law was voted in 1982, and today the whole of the collections for radio and TV is 17 million hours. We archive around the clock 166 radio and TV channels, and we make this available for research only. Within that same framework, the same legal framework, the web is now considered under the legal deposit framework. The law was voted in 2006, and it was transposition of a European directive that stated, as you can read here, that signs, signals, text, images, sounds, or messages of any kind made available to the public by electronic means be submitted to legal deposit. So it was first a European directive, and then it was applied in national laws. So in France, it was in 2006. Of course, why is it that so? Niels has been talking about it earlier on. It is because it was a context where everything was becoming digitized, either digitized or born on digital. The old material that was analog was moving online, like traditional press, scientific literature, all official documents, photography, even audiovisual documents. They were migrating online, but still being available on analog carrier. And also you had all these born digital material that was mostly available on social media for online communities that was available on the web. And so you have figures here that you might attest this. And besides those social and technical trends that urged institutions to start collecting online content, there was to maintain coherence and continuity in the collections. There was also that dimension that Niels underlined. It was the instability of online published content. Online published content does not self-preserve. It doesn't stay very much online. There was a Chicago University study that underlined, as far as news article, for example, that the link permanence average for a news article was 56 hours. So these were the reasons that were under the legal deposit for the web. And what is rather original in France is that the law stated that 2 institutions would be responsible for that. Sorry. The National Library, BNF, and INA. INA being responsible for collecting all broadcasters' online communication services, that anything broadcasters would publish online. Online communication services that were focusing on radio and TV, like programs, but also like blogs, fan websites, and all on-demand audiovisual media services. This is, of course, because INA had an expertise in archiving audiovisual content, and because it was needed to ensure that our collection would continue and enrich with this new kind of media. And BNF is responsible for everything else from the French web, like archiving 2 million .fr websites every year. We have different and very complementary approaches. BNF launches a crawl every year for the .fr websites. It takes a long time because it's over 2 million websites. They do specific and focused crawls sometimes, like during the elections. And INA, because we have developed a special method because we do archive audiovisual, which is a temporal media. We thought that we would apply the same techniques for the web, because the web is also a temporal media, as it was highlighted earlier. And we do continuous crawling, archiving the websites and the web content that we are responsible for. And this is because it also met with something that people have coined like media convergence, or some people say also TV 2.0, which was an economic, a social, and a technological shift with multiple platforms distributing audiovisual content online. The traditional operators, like the broadcasters, having cross-media strategies, meaning they broadcast on TV, but they also publish a lot of content online. And they developed also non-linear media services online, competing with fewer players like YouTube and Netflix and Hulu and other kinds. And of course, also new formats have emerged, like web documentaries, web series. And this in parallel with social evolutions that are called either social screens, second screen strategies, or social TV, when people watch TV with their computer or laptop or tablet or phone, and they interact with the program while watching TV. So to have a very comprehensive archive regarding television, we needed to take this into account. Here I have a few figures. That online video forecast for 2017 claims that people will spend an average of 47.4 minutes a day viewing online video, mainly driven by platforms like Hulu, Netflix, YouTube, and Facebook, and its complements. This is something I wanted to share with you. It's about how fast technology evolves and how fast also taking up usage has accelerated throughout the ages. It is figures from the Internet Advertising Bureau. And to reach 50 million users, it took 38 years for the radio. It took 13 years for TV, less than 5 years for the internet, and less than 2 years for videos on the internet. So institutions have to keep up with this space to make sure that their collections have coherence and continuity. So I'm not a technical person, and I've been in charge of the web archiving team, but as a manager, but of course there are a few things I have to say about how the archiving the web is organized. So there's collecting and harvesting through this crawl process that Niels highlighted earlier. It's crawling, indexing. Then of course there is the storage issue. The storage, maintaining the storage, duplicating the copies, because we are a heritage institution and we need to make sure that it's safe and will be available forever. So all the preservation strategy and the migrating strategies are very important. The curation, because the web is so spreading all over. We are limited to the French web, to the audiovisual part of the French web. So it's not easy to select, and it's actually a manual thing to select what we want to archive. So the curation aspect is very important to nominate the content we want to archive, and of course how we make it available with what tools and access issues is also very important. So we have the team, the web archive team at INA is around 7 to 8 people. There's an R&D team, like 3 engineers. There's an operation team, 3 engineers also. the curation team, which is like 2 people, and the chief engineer who manages the team now, whose name is Thomas Drujon, and who couldn't come here. So because the web has evolved ever since we started archiving, the law was voted in 2006. Then we had to wait a long time for the decree, or the application decree, which came up in 2011. But we started archiving our part of the web in 2009. So ever since 2009, the web has evolved very much, and so we started up with websites. Today, we consider that there's about 14,500 websites that we consider, and we archive on an everyday basis very frequently according to their update strategies. Also, because the web has evolved and now part of the web has become social, we archive social accounts on video platforms that we think are relevant with our collection strategy. We archive social accounts on Twitter that we think are relevant to our collection policy. And we'll soon be archiving social accounts on Facebook, open account on Facebook, if the Facebook policy doesn't change and allows it. Also, because all of these objects on the web are very diverse, we archive streams because, of course, web radios, web TVs, this is a streaming protocol, and we have started developing tools to collect streaming content. So our archive is very big. It's 66 billion of version. What? I don't have this in because well we count by units because we don't count as everything else. Okay, and then we increase this like by 12 billion a year. And of course, we do all the analysis and extraction. I'm not giving you terabyte figures because we use a different format than the WARC format. It's called the DAF, and we don't. I think Niels was saying that we can have several versions of a file several times. Well, we don't have several versions. We only archive one file, even if it comes up on the web several times, and we archive the metadata for these files. So we have several metadata regarding one file, but if the file is already in the archive, we don't archive it twice. So this is why we don't count the same way other web archives do regarding the size in terabyte, petabyte, or whatever. So you see here the archive grows. From 1996 to 2009, we have, of course, the archive from Internet Archive. We've asked an extraction regarding the data that we were interested in to Internet Archive. And ever since we started archiving, there has been an exponential growth in the size of the archive. So I was telling you about how the web has evolved and how we have adapted our collection policy to the evolution of the web. So in 2009, we started with just traditional website archiving, and we provided page browsing, a catalog of the websites we archived, and a full-text search engine. Then of course, the video amount of within our archive is very important because we are an audiovisual archive. And we started archiving accounts from video platforms, as I told you, in 2010. And we developed a specific search engine to search the videos, like you have on YouTube, actually. You can search the videos on YouTube. We have the same, pretty much the same thing. Then we had the streaming archiving, like web radios in 2013. And we started archiving Twitter in 2014. Twitter, from using the Twitter APIs, either from either archiving Twitter accounts that we think are relevant or archiving hashtags. We started this in 2014, and I have a little demo here. I'll show it to you. And we've had a different approach than the one we've been using for archiving website. When we archive website, we have a demo also I'll show you, the look and feel of the website, of how we archive them and how we make them available to the user was very important to us. We thought that it was it was necessary that the website pretty much looked the same as when it was originally archived. For Twitter, we have a different approach, because Twitter you can use your phone, you can use your browser, your computer. So Twitter, we archive the data. And we have a Twitter search engine. Okay, so I'll go fast. So here's regarding the videos, we have 16 million videos within the web archive from 13 different providers. I'm doing quick because I want to show you the videos. So of course there are challenges, obstacles and limits in archiving this content. As someone was saying earlier, we are very keen on the temporal dimension of the web, and we want to archive flows and objects. They're all different. We need to recreate users' experience whenever possible. So of course, our archive is not comprehensive at all. It is what some people call a Swiss cheese archive. There's some holes in it, some things we don't get from the deep web, from rich interactions, HTTP protocol, but now we are starting to have non-HTTP protocol. And here come the demos. I think that those are going to be interesting to you. So I have two. Browsing the INA Web Archive, the interface that the researchers use to get into the archive. And then the second one is a prototype of that has been developed to view at the same time a broadcast program and the tweets that go along with it. Okay. So here, this is the interface. It's written in French, so I'll translate. It's a browser. It's a Firefox browser extension. You can either type a URL, like in Internet Archive, and you access to a calendar interface, our own Wayback Machine in a way. You can unfold the calendar. You have years, months, days, and you see how often we crawl every day. You can select an hour of the given websites you want to view. So you select a day, a year, a day, a month, a day, an hour, and then you access to the website as it was when it was archived. You have date information available here. And then you can open a link. Of course, you navigate just like you would navigate on any browser. You open a link. You see you have videos that you cannot play on the web interface, but you can play it with our own media player.
Alors cette guerre, Dominique de Villepin, vous pensez que c'est une erreur?
So this is a video that was within the web page. We couldn't play it in the web page, but we use our own media player to view it. You have the catalog of all the websites that have been archived and cataloged that you can search using keywords and different criteria. You can view the records here on the records for the websites. Also, you have full text search. So you can search using just full text search, like Google-like search. The only difference is that you have a timeline here that represents the occurrences on the timeline, and the results are clustered. For one given website, the results are clustered, and you can unfold it if you want to see the different versions of a web page. You can restrict the query to one given website, so search full text search and restrict the query to one website. access the content. Same thing, you see there's something missing here. It's probably a video. You open the media player and you see the media player, the video that's within that page. And you can play it.
Nouvelle tentative de médiation en Syrie. Une réunion aura lieu demain.
Then you have the whole of the platforms that we archive the videos from. Here you have a list, Dailymotion and YouTube, and then you can use the search engine for searching videos, all the same. So you see here the displays like YouTube. You use the search engine and you display the videos.
Le seul à pouvoir marcher sur la glace.
And I'll go fast, and so, oops. I'll show you the prototype, because I guess I'm out of time, to access both broadcast material and the Twitter archive. So here you have an online catalog that anyone can query. You can query a program, select a program on the online catalog, and you will be able to view the program here. You have the record underneath. So here it's about the London attacks on BBC Worldwide. And you have on the side all the tweets that follow the timeline of the broadcast program. These you can analyze. So it's temporal. As the programs evolves, you have the tweets that match the program. There's a analysis tools for the Twitter archive. So here you have the distribution by country, by type of material. You have the top emojis within that selected program, the tweets that go. You have the top media, which media were the most shared on Twitter regarding that broadcast program. You have the top hashtags. So you have tools that enable you to analyze both the social reception of a broadcast program. Okay, I guess I am done. Regarding access and usage, we address researchers, mainly historians, digital humanities. The only thing is that we have a restriction for access. It's only on-site. So we have several libraries in France that make the archive available. Today it's over 40, and we plan on having 50 libraries that make this archive available for research purposes. Of course, the thing is, how are we going to develop the usage of our web archive? We are reaching like a crossroads when researchers are still used to old libraries habits like cataloging and the document approach, and we also want to meet the needs of the new generation, the Y generation, Z generation, where they are very much used on working from the live web, and of course they know how to use a web archive and more data-driven usage of our archive. Okay, and we've been working with several research projects, some of which are represented here and will be talked about tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're a bit pressed in time, so maybe we can take one question.
When you archive YouTube or Dailymotion videos, it's only French talking,
It has to relate.
No translations, no.
No. It's the legal deposit is a French law, so it needs to be provided by French editors using YouTube by French editors. So it's mostly French.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah.
Most of your wonderful user interfaces are actually based on text, right? On transcription of the video, and then that makes that the element that makes the videos searchable.
Yeah.
So my question is whether you are planning on the future of computer vision to think about new ways of accessing.
We are currently, well, actually, our user interfaces are evolving, and we have a research department who is very much working on like image recognition, and so we'll probably in the future, maybe not the too near future, have these kind of tools that enable image recognition or. Yeah. But I don't know if we archive or I don't know. I'd have to check. I don't know if it's possible to access the automatic transcript from the video we have archived.
It's not automatic.
No. I know. Thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting us with this fascinating undertaking. Our next speaker is Daniel Gomes, and from the Arquivo .pt of Portugal, and he'll be speaking about the Arquivo.pt past, present, and future. Daniel Gomes started in Arquivo PT, the Portuguese web archive, and currently leads this public service. His PhD thesis in computer science focused on the design of large-scale systems for the processing of web data. He's been a researcher in web archiving and web-based information systems since 2001.
Okay. Okay, so hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I work at the Foundation for Science and Technology, which is a public administration that manages research funding and digital services for the research and education community. And one of these services is Arquivo.pt that preserves web pages. But this service is publicly available. So some of our services are restricted, but this one is publicly available. So any one of you can use it. And the main objective of my presentation is that you try it at least once. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the past, the present, and the future of our work. So to talk about the past, I was preparing my presentation and I thought, oh, I have something that may be quite useful to talk about the past, that is Arquivo.pt. So I did what the Americans say, to eat your own dog food. So I tried to use Arquivo.pt to tell the story about Arquivo.pt. Let's see how did it go. So I began studying at the University of Lisbon in 1996, and the site in 1986 was something like this. So basically what it says here is that this was an experimental World Wide Web server. So this was basically an experiment about this new technology. Actually, this was the site of the university, because the computer science site was the site of the university, because there was no other site. So this was how things were at the time. So I became a researcher in 2000, and this was the website. So my name's here. So this research group, they worked a lot on web search engines and information retrieval. So in 2002, we developed a search engine for the Portuguese web. So as during this project, we did a lot of crawls from the Portuguese web in our experiments. We kept all these crawls. And in 2006, when I was finishing my PhD, we developed a web archive, a prototype for a web archive for the Portuguese web. And this was the user interface. Then I was invited to begin a real web archive in 2007. And this was the first page that we did that presented this new project. So the first crawl that we did of the Portuguese web was done in 2008, and we gathered 56 million files, around 1.6 terabytes of data. So one thing that I'd like to bring your attention is, despite we being focused on the Portuguese web, we can get the Portuguese perspectives on international events. So for instance, here we have a lot of news about what was the Barack Obama elections and campaign from a Portuguese perspective. And this can be quite interesting from a research perspective. And this was the first prototype of our search system. So this was something that since the beginning of the project that we were very aware of, that just getting the information and storing it was not enough. That will not create a useful research service or even a service. So our objective is to create services that people use. So since the beginning, we aim to do an efficient and effective search system. So this was the first prototype that we developed. And besides doing the broad crawls of the .pt domain, we also start doing some selective crawls of 215 online publications that were selected by the National Library. So since then, a set of online publications is crawled and archived every day. So they are mainly news sites and online magazines. As our project started in 2007, we got all the .pt domains from the Internet Archive, and we integrated them on archive.pt. So now you can access this information also on archive.pt. The usability is very important. So you have to test the usability of the websites. You're going to have user experience professionals helping you on your team, because otherwise you're going to have a very good system that only you can use. So we had some help from the University of Lisbon, from the Human-Computer Interaction Group, and we redesigned for the first time our website. And this is kind of a recursive example in which you can see the Portuguese Web Archive page that was archived at arquivo.pt, so it's recursive. So you think an archive page of the Web Archive. And if you click here, you can see archived versions of archived pages. So you better not think much about this. Okay, so my colleague, he did his PhD thesis on information search in web archives. So this was a really big problem, how to make web archives searchable. By searchable, we mean, in first instance, by full text searchable with relevant results. So if you're interested in web archives, I strongly recommend that you could take a look at this PhD thesis from my colleague. And as we are very close to the research community, we did in 2014 a project to automatically identify and preserve websites related to research and development projects. So this, like the European Commission and even in the national funding agencies, they put a lot of money in research, and a lot of the results from research are exclusively published on the websites. Now the problem is that projects finish, okay? And when the project finish, the site that has all this very interesting information, like the PowerPoints, the videos from the workshops, all the proceedings, that many times today the proceedings are exclusively online, they disappear and they are lost. So we did this project in which we automatically found the information and got this information. Like, for instance, this project was about improving the safety of vehicles. So this is a very important thing. And this is one of the examples of the site that no longer exists. We have a paper on this. So between 2014 and 2015, we worked a lot on improving the robustness of our service. So this was like a major release was the Phoenix release, in which you have the system become a lot better, the service. So it was a transition from a project to a service, which is a major difference. So since then, we have been providing an availability of the service of 100%. So it never failed since 2016, day and night, 24/7. And this brings me to the present. So the present keeps on going. So I'm going to talk about the last year. So the main highlights. So today we have archive.pt, that is a free, open access governmental service. So you can use it, anyone can use it anytime. And basically it provides URL search. So if you know the URL that you are looking, you're going to get a list of all the versions of that URL that we have, so something like the Wayback Machine. We have full text search. So for instance, here I typed European elections, and you get all the pages from the past that contain the words European elections, and an advanced search in which, for instance, you can search for given words within just one site, or within a given date range, or excluding some words. So sometimes when you have more tricky research questions, this gets kind of handy. So all our user interfaces are provided in Portuguese and English. So 34% of our users used mobile devices to access our service in 2017. So initially our user interface were not responsive. So last year we released a new version of the service in which it became completely mobile friendly. And we also did another thing that I believe is quite handy, is that for the most recent sites, when we have a mobile version of the site and the user using a mobile device, we present the mobile version of the archived site. So using a cell phone, you access the site, and that site has a mobile version, so the mobile version will be presented on your cell phone and not the desktop version. This is a detail that is quite handy.
Can I choose it? Can I see both?
Yeah. So, at least I hope so. If it doesn't work, please tell me. Yeah, of course. So one thing that is quite interesting is that at this moment, most of our users come from Portugal and from the United States. And the majority of the users are already international. So 53% come already from other countries than Portugal. How do I know? Google Analytics, we used Google Analytics. I didn't say that they were not Portuguese. I was saying they're coming from outside of Portugal. So,
You have to know Portuguese?
Sorry?
You have to know Portuguese?
No, they don't. No, okay, I'm going to talk about the language in a few slides. Just okay. So, so the number of users keeps on growing. So this is our statistics across time. So now we have a steady growing trend. And last year we received 100,000 users, and our target was 70,000. So we got really happy with this. So the archive data keeps on growing. We have at this moment 5 billion files, which corresponds to 240 terabytes of data, and 90% of the sites are under the .pt domain. However, being under the .pt domain does not mean that they are written in Portuguese. It just means that they are under the .pt domain. So we have mainly sites in Portuguese language and English. These are the main, but not exclusively. So I did an experiment, and I went to Google Translate, and I typed some words like Jerusalem, Hebrew, and Tel Aviv, I think. So and then I just copy-pasted this word, this is Jerusalem, into the full-text search engine, and I thought this is not going to work because the chart set is different, it's not going to work. But it worked. So I got really surprised at it because I already did some experiments with Latin languages, and it worked. And I got really happy that I was able to find, like, for instance, this website from an international Jewish organization. This is from the university, and this one is for Wikipedia. So we have, hopefully, content in every languages. Of course, that in Portuguese, the sites are more exhaustively crawled, And for instance, these pages, these sites just have a few pages archived. Still, they can be useful. Anyway, if you like your site to be preserved, just send us and we'll present it. We'll preserve it. So just go to arquivo.pt/suggest, and we accept any domain, any language, and we accept any site of broad interest to the Portuguese community. I'm Portuguese, so I think all the sites are interesting. So we also perform selective and collaborative crawls. This is quite an interesting subject because all our workflow is optimized because it's a lot of information. And we are computer scientists, so we like to put the computers to work for us. But in some matters, the interaction and the collaboration with people is mandatory. Like, for instance, to identify the websites related to the selections, because to the elections, because they appear very close to the election dates and then disappear very quickly afterwards. And for instance, if you are talking about local elections from a city or a small place, only the people from those places know that the sites exist. So what we did is that we have been challenging our community to help us. So this is done in a very straightforward way. We have a Google Sheet, we announce it and say, send it here, all the links from that you know. And then we get this information. And I like to show this site here that we got. That is a very interesting site that basically, it's a website that contains published printed outdoors. So by web archiving this site, we are preserving outdoors that were printed. So we're preserving printed media that was never meant for the web. So all the hardware is hosted at our own data center. So the system is a distributed system hosted on 75 servers. We have 1.2 petabytes of disk capacity and 11 terabytes of memory. We're planning to increase this capacity this year. Okay, so basically in our organization and in general in our country, open access rules. So all the software that we do is born open source, so anyone can use it for free. And all our publications are open access also. Here, arquivo.pt/publications, we have over 40 scientific and technical publications about web archiving. So if you are interested in this manner, I invite you to take a look at this. So besides managing web archive, FCT is also the main entity that is pushing open access to scientific publications. Okay, so basically it's in our DNA. So we have been doing a lot of training and dissemination because most researchers and most people at this moment still don't know that web archives exist. So for that, we created three main training courses on web preservation research. And they are described here, arquivo.pt/training. So the first one is about what are web archives for, how to use them. So basically, how are these new ways of searching the past? And this training is targeted to any internet user. So anyone is welcome to come. The second one is targeted to web authors. It's basically how to publish information so that it can be preserved for the future. So in the same way that you do not publish a book with the paper from the newspaper, which is very weak, you also should not publish websites without disregarding how you do it. So basically, we teach a few things so that people can publish information to be preserved online. And the third one is targets developers. So basically, we provide APIs so that other people can create new services or new applications of our service. And basically, this is we teach how to use them. And we also publish the recommendations that I mentioned about how to publish information to be preserved. So we have these recommendations online in Portuguese and English. So it could be also an interesting reference. Okay, so talking about research, last year we granted 3 bursaries, and we asked people to send their projects on how they plan to use archive.pt. And we got over 60 applications. So it was very surprising to us. Many interesting ideas, but we only had 3 bursaries. So these ones were the one that we selected. So the first one is related to communication studies. And the author, he basically studied the transformation of websites of Portuguese newspapers, okay, across time. The second one was related to information science. And the idea was to make an online exhibition about the history of a faculty. So this faculty here is the Faculty for Social Sciences and Humanities. It celebrated 40 years of existence, but 20 years were already online. So basically, if you do not talk about the online presence, it will be like a very incomplete story. So the author did a very interesting study on this. And the third study was on social sciences. And this was about the straight edge punk culture in how did it arrive in Portugal and how did it spread using the internet. So if you want to learn more about these projects, they have videos, presentations, reports at archive.pt/research. And last year we celebrated 10 years of Project Start. So we did a full day event with over 130 participants, and we had national and international speakers. And this is our current main dissemination activity. So basically it's a prize in which we challenge anyone to subject a project, a work, that used archive.pt as the main source of information. And the first prize is 10,000 euros, the second is 2,000, and the third is 2,000. So anyone can submit. The only thing is that the submissions must be in Portuguese. Just have to hire someone that speaks Portuguese. Not that easy, not that difficult. Okay, so the future, new projects and challenges. So this is something that we are now pushing. It's a new service called archive.pt Memorial. So the websites, some sites after a few years, they still contain information that is very interesting, but they are a headache to maintain. So they're not updated, but nobody is really looking at them. So they cannot be shut down, but they're not updated, so they become just a headache for the organizations. Like, they're there, they're attacked, they require a lot of maintenance, so we have the solution for this. So basically, send the websites to the archive.pt memorial, and basically, the site maintains the same URL, but it starts linking to the archive.pt version. So we're combining this with high-quality crawling using the Internet Archive browser, and it has worked quite fine. And this is the first example that we are showing. So basically, this was the funding agency that began funding our project. The funding agency no longer exists, and we still exist, which is quite nice. And the other one is Robustify, that is basically to mitigate the problem of broken links. So broken links are a big headache on all websites. And for instance, this web page is my CV that is online. And I don't keep the links. I have more things to do than keep on fixing the links. So basically, I just put one line of code, and now all the broken links, they link to the archive.pt. So this is very simple, straightforward, and I don't have to worry anymore about this. So this is also based on an existing open project, also very interesting, and we adapt it. Okay, so the main challenge that we have been pursuing for the last years is image search. So this is something that the users definitely want from web archives, is searching images from the past. First thing they want is search text from the past. The second one is search images from the past. And for instance here, if we look for Cristiano Ronaldo, you can see like a lot of images here. They're not very clear here, but you can see how did he look when he was a kid, like even at early age. And this is a running prototype. So this already works at our facilities. The problem is that it's quite slow, so we did not make it publicly available yet. So this is application programming interfaces. So basically the idea is that people will develop new applications targeted to given communities. Like, we cannot develop services to every community and to every use case. So the idea is to provide this API so that people can make applications targeted to the requirements of people from social sciences or from linguistics. And the idea is that we give the infrastructure, research infrastructure, and that other people then develop this. So we can take a look at it at arquivo.pt/API. And this was an application that was made by the students of computer science. So they just had very little time to do this application. And they did, well, all the students from this course, they did an application that they gathered information about politicians. So using Twitter, API, YouTube, and when they wanted to get information from the past, they used arquivo.pt. So basically, to conclude my presentation, I would say that the past was about learning. So basically, we had to learn about how to build a web archive. And then the present, or the latest years, were about how to develop, how to build an efficient system. And the future, the main challenge of the future, with how to disseminate this service, because after these two parts are extremely difficult. And after you passed all these parts, and I did it myself and my team, despite my team has been changing across time, it's amazing how difficult it is to disseminate. Well, nothing is easy. Okay, everything is difficult, but everything is attainable. So basically, disseminate to become a public service useful to all society will be, and it is, our current challenge. So when you want to search pages from the past, use arquivo.pt. Toda. I think we have time for questions. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, questions, please.
So you said in the end that nothing is easy, but you make it sound like it's very easy. And I think maybe many people in the audience are not aware of the fact of how unusual it is to have a national library, or sorry, a national web archive that offers all these services. How do you do it? I mean, all the other national libraries across Europe are hindered by legal issues. They can't make their archives accessible. Researchers have to go to the libraries to visit pages one by one. So what is the Portuguese secret to making this an example to all other national web archives?
Okay, first of all, we're not the national library, okay? So the DNA makes a lot of difference. Where we were born makes a lot of difference, because we were born at the foundation that was created for to manage digital infrastructures. So I don't have to convince anyone that we must be open. So that's not even an issue. Like when I tell someone that the other web archives are closed from the digital world, they're like, what? So they're closing access to something that was born open. I said, yes. I said, okay. And then when you start talking to politicians, they have the same opinion as us. So for us, being open was not an issue. Like, how do you make this? Just make it. Don't ask, you do it, work. You have a lot of work. And I summarized 20 years in 20 minutes. Obviously, this looks easy. But I had horror stories that I could share with you. Like, we collapsed completely in 2013. My team resigned in 1 year at the same time that the service collapsed. Okay, so it's not easy.
As a follow-up question on that, from Anat, have you found, so the experience of several other nations in this is that actually part of that negotiation about openness and closeness is to do with the commercial interest of well, particularly the media companies, by and large. I wonder whether in the Portuguese context you've actually had any pushback against what the approach you've taken.
We have pushed forward, because talking about economical value, we're preserving what they haven't preserved on their heritage. Like a media company, they get very happy that we preserve their information, because at the time that they published 10 years ago, they did not have the awareness of doing that. So the economic value of web archiving is huge. I have, well, another presentation in which basically I present a value of 216 billion euros that were invested on the pages that we preserved and already disappeared. So, the question was the economic value and the negotiations. Most people don't even know that web archives exist, so they're not worried about it. And yeah, and talking about other nation experience, yeah, we took an example from the United States. They are the oldest one. They have been working since 1996. So I don't see how we should. Why should you use other examples than the oldest web archive that exists and works and don't have problems? So.
One last question, please.
Thank you for the very interesting and uplifting lecture. I have a question about copyrights. How do you tackle with this issue? Because the photographs, the images, the videos are all protected by copyrights laws. And this is something very strong globally. And all the lectures until now, a little bit, like, didn't want to tackle this thing.
Okay, yeah, we addressed that. No. So basically, we respect the robots.txt exclusion protocol. So if someone doesn't want their information to be crawled, we don't crawl it. Okay, first one. Second one, all the authors that own the copyrights can ask for the content to be removed from archive.pt, and we answer those kind of requests. Third one, we have an embargo period of 1 year that basically to don't compete with the online versions of the sites, we wait 1 year because we are a web archive from, we want to keep information from the past. So this guarantees that all the information that we have there is from the past and is not competing with accesses with the online services. Yeah, so these are the three main things that we do. And the sorry, I couldn't hear.
It's also not indexed by Google, so there is no direct competition. Because if I write the name of the website, I won't get to the website in your archive. So it's another element, no? If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
No.
Okay.
I don't know. I think Google indexes some pages. Like, we do not forbid Google from going there. I don't know. Probably due to the ranking algorithms that they use, most people won't find our web archive. But we're not forbidding them to do that, and they're coming with the Google bots. So, yeah. And just one last thing: we get 2 or 3 complaints per year. 2 or 3 complaints per year, and but we get a lot of complaints from people that saying you're not archiving our website, or that our website is not. This is for real. This is for real. People say, my website doesn't have any images archived. What are you doing? Like, people complain about that much more than they complain about having information removed. Like, well, everybody gets happy. This is a free digital preservation that we are giving them, that otherwise they'll be having to pay for. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for this amazing project and perseverance. It's very impressive. Our next speaker will be Sally Chambers from Ghent Center for Digital Humanities in Belgium, and we'll be seeing her here on the screen. Sally Chambers is Digital Humanities Research Coordinator at Ghent Center for Digital Humanities, where she coordinates Belgian participation in DARIA, the digital research infrastructure for the arts and humanities. Her role in the PROMISE project is related to the provision of research access and use of the pilot Belgian web archive. Sally will be talking about investigating the promise of a Belgian web archive. So please.
Sally, can you hear me?
Yes.
The presentation before was perfect. If you do share screen, we will see you too. If not, the presentation only is good because we hear you very well.
Okay, cool.
So if you do share screen. Yes.
Sorry, I can't get the face at the same time. Sorry, I don't think. No, sorry, I can't. I hope that's okay.
Yes, perfect. You can go on.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. So, as I was just saying, the Promise project is this feasibility study for a Belgian web archive. So I'll give you an update on where we currently are in the project, about the web archiving, the state of the art we've been doing, and now we're moving on to the analysis of user requirements for a Belgian web archive. And finally, I will talk a little bit about the importance of research access and use of web archives in quite a similar way that Daniel has just said now. Ooh. So, introducing the Belgian web. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the complexities of the Belgian web. Firstly, the first websites were available from the early 90s in Belgium. And currently there are over 1.6 million domain names on the Belgian web. But as yet, the Belgian web is not currently systematically archived. So in Niels's first talk this morning, Belgium is one of those countries that doesn't have a national web archive. So what is it special about how we could collect the Belgian web? So as many of you will probably know, Belgium is a federal state. It is made up of 3 regions, the Flemish region, the Walloon region, and the Brussels capital region, and also 3 communities, the Flemish community, the French community, and the German-speaking community. So that means we also have 3 languages, Dutch, French, and German, and also many regional languages. Dialect is still extremely important in many areas of Belgium. So these are sort of issues that we need to take into account when archiving the Belgian web. Dns Belgium, our DNS registration agency, has done a lot of work around the Belgian web. They were one of the pioneers of setting up DNS and all web things in Europe. Here are some examples of geographic distribution of domains per municipality. So they started collecting this information in 2003, and here is the latest information from their annual report in 2017. The darker the color, the more density of DNS domains per municipality. So you can see the Belgian web has grown significantly. And just a couple of things we need to take into account. This comes from DNS Belgium's most recent annual report, 2017. If we're thinking about doing a top-level domain crawl for Belgium, only just under 60% of the domains fall under .be. So that means we could miss 40% of the websites available, of the domains available, if we do a top-level domain crawl. So something to bear in mind. So let me tell you a little bit about the Promise project, which is a feasibility study for a Belgian web archive. So the Promise project was funded in early 2017 by our federal science, so the Belgian Science Policy Office, with a scientific start date of 1st of September. So we're now, about 3/4 of the way through the first year of a 24-month, 2-year project. The Royal Library of Belgium, our national library here in Belgium, is the project coordinator, and the project was initiated together with the State Archives of Belgium, which are the National Archives of Belgium. Additionally, we have a number of research groups working on the project. So for my own university, Ghent University, we have the Media and ICT group, as well as my own research group, Ghent Centre for Digital Humanities. In the University of Namur, we're working together with the legal colleagues from the Centre of Information, Law and Society. So all these questions about Daniel's archive just now, and we've got some great legal experts to help us. And from the technical side of things, we've got the Centre for Information and Documentation Sciences from the High School of Brussels-Brabant in Brussels too. So we've got a really great interdisciplinary team to help us with the project. So what are the goals of the project? So there's 4 main objectives. The first one is to identify current best practices in web archiving and then apply them to the Belgian context. In a few moments, we've done this work already, and in a few moments, I will tell you a little bit more about what we discovered during our State of the Art survey. We will also do some pilot web archiving in Belgium. So based on what we learn in the state of the art and also the user requirements analysis, we will set up some tests to be able to do a pilot so we can base the evidence, we can create an evidence base for a future Belgian web archive. Of course, if we archive all this material, the important thing is not in a box somewhere or in a server somewhere not being used. So access to and use of, which I will talk about, is 2 different things, of the pilot Belgian Web Archive, particularly looking at scientific research, is of paramount importance to us. And finally, the main goal of the project is that we need to make recommendations for a sustainable web archiving service in Belgium, and that includes a business model, and see how we could go forward in this way. So what can we think about archiving the web in Belgium? From the 2 main, so the project 2 main initiators of the project, the Royal Library and the State Archives of Belgium, we have 2 very different mandates in terms of what their missions are regarding the Belgian web. So if we take first a look at the Royal Library of Belgium, Belgium does have a legal deposit law, which was initially set up in 1965 with a revision in 2008. The legal deposit law is to preserve all types of documents, both published in the Belgian territory or published abroad by Belgians. Under the legal deposit mandate, publications, websites can be seen as publications in the same way the books, periodicals or so. However, one thing, and I will talk about that in difference to the State Archives, once things have been deposited or made available in the legal deposit, they cannot, for legal reasons, be removed. There was also a nice, let's say, semantic question around this. Is web archiving depositing at all? Because it's more of an archival process. And that was questioned when the discussions around the legal deposit. Does web archiving fall under legal deposit law? And to make sure that we wouldn't run into any problems about this, the Royal Library's mission at the sort of strategic mandate level was changed to include web archiving as one of its missions at the end of 2016. Now, if we think about the State Archives in Belgium, there is a federal law in archives a little bit earlier than the legal deposit law, which came into play in 1955. The mandate of the State Archives of Belgium is to preserve documentary heritage of the federal public authorities. So, for example, the ministries and the various different agencies of the federal government. In the State Archives of Belgium, we need to look for the archival life cycle, which includes retention and destruction of archives. So in the way, that's where the difference is with legal deposit. Things that have been put in under legal deposit cannot legally be removed, but archive archival process, the destruction and removal of archives are included in the archival life cycle. Information produced by public authorities and published through digital media are included under the federal law on archives, except intranet and social media, intranet provisions, so privately available things are not currently covered. And web archiving is also part of the mission of the state archives. So just to run through this, here are the various links. So this is the legal deposit link from the Royal Library. So you can see the original legal deposit legislation plus the new update in 2008. And most recently, a legal deposit is being broadened out. This was in November 2017 to include digital publications. And here we're looking at specific how web archiving fits into that and whether the implementation needs to have more provisions around web archiving, in particular as part of the digital legal deposit. And here is also the link to the federal archive law regarding, and that incorporates both that and the update of the federal archive law in Belgium. If we just think briefly, so this has all been talking all about the Royal Library and the State Archives is looking at the federal things. But if we think all about these different regions and communities, they fall under different jurisdictions within Belgium. So we can see, for the example here is for one of the Flemish institutes, archiving institutes, the Institute, Amsterdam Institute of Social History, which is in Flanders. And they're looking at social movements, for example. So they, within their collection policy, they archive websites. This is a particular indie media. They have a full archive of the indie media alternative platform archived in their collections. Could we think about a federated web archive so that all of the different jurisdictions, Flemish, Wallonian, Brussels, and all the different languages could be archived in a kind of cobweb? And this software we're looking from, based in the US, may be something we could consider about getting a federated web archive for Belgium. So where are we currently in the project? So the first phase of the work package, first phase of the project was to look at the state of the art of web archiving internationally. So we delivered a first promise report, and the objective of this report was to provide an overview of international best practices in web archiving. So we've had two versions of the report, one by the initial delivery date of January this year, which included 10 initiatives from 7 different countries. And then we did an update of the report, which I'll tell you a little about in a second, in spring 2018 with 2 additional countries. The methodology behind our state-of-the-art report was first phase to undertake a literature review, so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There's been a lot of literature and various different studies about what the current state-of-the-art of web archiving practices is, so we wanted to capture all that with a 15-page bibliography. And then from that, we selected some of the different archiving, web archiving initiatives that would be particularly of interest to the Belgian context. And for those, we undertook semi-structured interviews with the various different colleagues. So if we take the example of both the Portuguese Web Archive and INA, they're included in the promised report. Then we did the synthesis. So we looked at 4 kinds of issues: selection of what content to archive, access to that content, the legal issues, and also the technical issues. The last one being extremely important because we want to carry out a pilot web archiving activity. And finally, we made some recommendations based on what we learned during the state-of-the-art reporting. So an overview of the web archiving initiatives we chose. So you can see here we have 9 countries in total. Next to each of the countries you see these abbreviations, NL or NA, so National Library or National Archive. And of course there are various different exceptions to that. So INA, who we've just seen Claude's presentation from, and also Portugal in Arquivo.pt. So they're the differences. We selected particularly the Netherlands and France because our 2 biggest linguistic communities in the Belgium are Dutch and French, and Luxembourg also because a new geographically very close to Belgium, but also having multilingual content. The United Kingdom being one of the key countries involved in web archiving from a very early stage, and also having the National Library and National Archive being involved in the process. So because in Belgium we have that same case, that's very interesting for us. Denmark, I think Niels has told many things about Denmark and their activities, so being a world leader in this area. Ireland being a newer player in the web archiving world and very much looking at their activities. And then the 2 new countries, Canada and Switzerland. We'd originally wanted to stick to Europe, but we chose Canada for 2 particular reasons. A close collaboration between the National Archives and National Library in terms of Canada, but also looking at the multilingual activities between the legislation to do with English and French within Canada, and also Switzerland for a similar reason. And indeed, they were also dealing with multilingual archiving. So now, if we think about the 4 issues of selection, access, legal, and technical, I'll give you a little bit of feedback about what we learned during the state of the art. So what is Belgian web content? That is a very good question and something that we really need to consider well when putting together our selection policy, both for the pilot project and for the future sustainability service. Through looking at the various different initiatives, there is a wide variety of different policies, from selective to top-level domain crawl, or a mixture of both. So for what we need in Belgium, we need a thorough reflection on this area. We need to take into account the institutional context of the Belgian Royal Library and the State Archives, both looking at the different mandates, but also the different legal issues related to that. One thing we very much see is that, and I think Daniel just mentioned it also, about the importance of involving users in the whole process. So that is central to the work that we'll be doing in Belgium. It would seem that in the social media, and it was great to see the presentation just now of Ina, how they're dealing with social media, and this is something, it's more tricky, I think, to deal with that, but is that something we want to include as part of the work we'll do in Belgium? And because DNS Belgium has done a lot of work and done a lot of analysis, it's very important that we develop a partnership with our registration agency, and we've already had a first meeting and they're already providing us some data. So I think we've got great potential to work with them further on the project. If we can look at access now, from what we learned in the state of the art, there's a variety of access options, from currently no access, for example, in the state of, which is in the case of Luxembourg at the moment. They have been working very much on the archiving functionalities, but as yet don't provide access, to the freely accessible, as we've already heard in the Portuguese Web Archive story from Daniel. One of the things, because we're looking at the research principles behind this, we would like to use the FAIR principles, so findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And if we can try and use those as the guiding principle about providing access to the future Belgium Web Archive, we think we'll be moving in the right direction. Other things that we noticed are important: the publication of seed lists, and also regarding the search engines, Even if for whatever reason we cannot provide access to the actual archive data, then metadata is an important priority. People need to know what is available inside the archive. So we will put an emphasis on the importance of metadata. Data level archive access to the web archive, for example, access to the work files is extremely important and will be something which is particularly of interest for example, for my background in digital humanities research. And again, making sure that user feedback in the loop, as Daniel's just said, the importance of including user experience people in the development of the web archiving interfaces. And if I understand correctly, with INA, they've done a lot of work in this, making the tools really user-friendly. So we want to build on this experience and make sure that users are always part of the loop of the software and interfaces that we develop. Thirdly, looking at the legal side, and this is not my area of expertise, but the University of Namur is doing some excellent work in this area. So as I mentioned, legal deposit legislation in Belgium has recently been extended to include digital publications, but we do feel that more implementation guidelines are required for how web archives fit into this digital legal publication. We've been looking also at the scope of competence. So at this stage, it seems that everything included in the .be top level domain would be considered as part of the legal mandates, and also things that are included within the .be domain with additional selection criteria. So for example, websites of interest being published by Belgian nationals who are living outside of Belgium. We've been particularly looking at three areas of legal challenges: copyright, the protection of personal data, and the new general data protection regulation that comes into play in Europe in May this year is of consideration, and also looking at illegal content. And if we do top-level domain crawls, there is the likelihood of the illegal content will come in as part of the crawl, and how we would deal with that. And one of the things from particularly the access perspective, in what way is remote access to the web archive would be possible within the current Belgian legal framework. Ideally, if we can get beyond people needing to come into a national library or a national archive to access the data, so perhaps a login access where researchers can log in remotely, that would be an ideal situation. So we need to see if the Belgian legal framework is up to this. In terms of the technical side of things, we've been looking at the analysis of the key tools and software platforms. And as Daniel mentioned, there's a lot of open access software out there. We have a long list of tools and platforms. But for example, NetArchive Suite, BC Web, and the others are something. And for the pilot phase, we will actually do a short list of these tools and select which ones we actually want to test during the piloting phase. We've been looking at the analysis of the data formats, and WARC is by far most the predominant, so this is something that we will probably be working directly with. We've also looked at the models of managing the technical process. So in the final stages of the project, we actually have to come up with a business model and how we would implement a web archiving, a sustainable web archiving solution for Belgium. So we need to look about what are the benefits of outsourcing. So there was, in the state of the art, we could see that from completely outsourced to completely fully in-house managed web archiving solutions were available, and many mixtures in between. And we also feel in this area that exploring the possibility of joining the IIPC would be very valuable, because there's a lot of technical expertise and we need to be part of that community. We will be publishing the report, but first, because we're a research organisation, we will be creating a publication that is now the second peer review has just gone through. So Web Archives as a data resource for digital scholars is the article that will be coming soon in a new journal, digital scholarly, called The Digital Scholar, that will be made available open access. So we hope to see that publication as a result of our state-of-the-art access coming pretty soon. So what are we currently busy with now? We are working on analysis of user requirements for the Belgian Web Archive. So we're doing that through a questionnaire that we are currently launching. It was launched in April of this year and will run until the end of May. And what we want to look at is particularly the selection and use of web archives. Our target is to get 200 respondents from both locally, within Belgium, regionally, nationally, and an international focus. So we're definitely not just focusing on the Belgian context. If we can get more than 200, that would be great. And the last count was we've got around 150 respondents. So any of you out there who would be interested in doing the survey, we would love to hear from you. We've got 3 target groups for the survey. So the first one is research in general, and we're looking from anybody from students, academics, but anyone more broadly involved in a research context. So for example, I'm a digital humanities research coordinator, so I do little research myself, but I'm helping all of the different researchers to be able to do their research in digital humanities. So we want to have anybody involved in the broad research context. The second target group for surveys are the cultural heritage sector, so archives, libraries who are working in terms of web archiving, but also government institutions. So, for example, the federal state archives. There's very much in government institutions involved in their mandate. So we want to these employees of these institutions are a very important target group for our survey, and of course the general public. We want the future Belgian Web Archive to be as openly available as possible.
Sally?
And what kind of questions?
Sally?
Yes?
We have 1 more minute for the presentation, and we will not be able to take questions if it's not shorter than that. So.
Okay, I have just a couple of more slides. Thanks very much.
Okay.
So, yes, let me skip then to the specific questions. So the things that we're looking at in the web archiving survey is what kind of research questions do researchers would like to answer? What kind of subjects are they interested in terms of web archiving? What are their current levels of satisfactions with the web archives if they already use them? What sort of search options and functionalities would they like to see? And what kinds of methods of access would they, for example, like data level access or APIs? And very much important, we're interested in seeing what kind of collaboration they would like to do regarding selection and curation of web archive content. So here's the link to the survey, and I will tweet it afterwards. So please, you're very welcome to join in. And just to finalise, I think this has been covered in some ways, but we think research use of web archives is beyond access. So it is really the next step forward. So the initiatives that have been mentioned, so is Niels mentioned the RESOAR initiative about the research infrastructure for the study of web archive web material. The Buddha project from Jane Winters in the UK, where they offered many bursaries for the research use of archived web material. In the University of Waterloo, so Ian Milligan, a lot of the research work that his group is doing around web archives. We see this is very much the future and something that Belgium would very much like to be involved in. I've mentioned data level access to web archives. That's my personal interest area. But the importance of connecting to the community. So the IIPC and the work that they do in this area is extremely important. So that was a very whistle-stop tour. We together with Valerie Schaefer, who is also participating virtually and will be in the panel discussion tomorrow. We're also organising an introduction to Born Digital Heritage, from harvesting to analysing web archives, at the Digital Humanities Conference in Benelux in Amsterdam this June. So if you're about, we'd love to see you there. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Sally, for sharing with us this promising initiative. And I'm sorry, but we're so behind in our schedule, so we won't be able to take questions. So thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.